Someone is going to tell you that renting is throwing money away. They might have already said it. It might be a parent, a colleague, a real estate agent, or just the general background noise of the culture you grew up in. And the reason it sticks is because it sounds completely logical. You pay rent every month and you get nothing back. You pay a mortgage every month and you are building equity. One is obviously better than the other. Except that the math, when you actually run it honestly and completely, does not always agree. And in many situations, the math says something that is going to surprise you. This is not an argument against buying a home. Buying a home can be a genuinely excellent financial decision, but it can also be a catastrophically expensive one, depending on when you buy, where you buy, how you buy, and what you do with the money in either scenario. The goal of this video is to give you the real math, not the version that real estate agents use when they are trying to close a sale, and not the version that renters use when they are defending a choice they have already made. Just the math. Let us start with what the rent versus buy debate usually looks like and why it usually misleads you. The standard comparison goes like this. You are renting an apartment for $2,000 a month. That is $24,000 a year that disappears. You get no equity. You own nothing at the end of the month. Now imagine instead you buy a home with a similar monthly mortgage payment. Every month, part of that payment goes toward principal, which means you are building ownership in an asset. At the end of 30 years, you own the home outright. The renter owns nothing. Obviously, buying is better. This comparison is not wrong. It is just wildly incomplete. And the parts it leaves out are the parts that actually determine which decision is better for your specific situation. Here is what the standard comparison ignores: the down payment. When you buy a home, you need to put money down. The standard advice is 20%. On a $400,000 home, that is $80,000. That $80,000 does not disappear, but it does stop working for you in any other way from the moment you put it into the house. If that $80,000 had instead been invested in a diversified stock portfolio at a historically realistic 8% annual return, it would be worth approximately $360,000 30 years later. That is the opportunity cost of the down payment, and the standard rent versus buy comparison never mentions it. The carrying costs of ownership. When you rent, your housing cost each month is your rent. When you own, your housing cost each month is your mortgage payment, plus property taxes, plus homeowner's insurance, plus maintenance. Financial planners typically estimate maintenance at 1 to 2% of a home's value per year. On a $400,000 home, that is $4,000 to $8,000 per year in maintenance alone. That is not an edge case. Roofs need replacing, appliances fail, HVAC systems age, water heaters leak. These costs are real, they are consistent, and they are never included in the rosy version of the buy versus rent comparison. The transaction costs of buying and selling. When you buy a home and later sell it, the costs of those two transactions are staggering. Buyer closing costs typically run 2 to 5% of the purchase price. Seller closing costs, dominated by real estate agent commissions, have historically run 5 to 6% of the sale price. Add those together, and on a $400,000 home purchase, you are potentially spending $30,000 to $40,000 just in transaction costs. If you sell the home before it has had time to appreciate enough to cover those costs, you can easily lose money even in a rising market. The interest cost of the mortgage. On a 30-year fixed mortgage at 7%, on a $320,000 loan after a 20% down payment on a $400,000 home, your total interest paid over the life of the loan is approximately $430,000. You will have paid roughly $750,000 total for a home that cost $400,000. This is not a scandal. It is simply how compound interest works when it is working against you instead of for you. but it is a number that almost nobody mentions in the conversation about building equity. Now let us do the real comparison, the honest one. Imagine two people, both have $80,000 saved and incomes that give them roughly comparable monthly budgets for housing. Person A buys a $400,000 home, 20% down, 30-year fixed mortgage at 7%, monthly mortgage payment, approximately $2,129. Property taxes in their area run about $400 per month. Insurance runs approximately $150 per month. Average monthly maintenance, budgeted at 1.5% per year, runs approximately $500 per month. Total monthly cost of homeownership, roughly $3,179. Person B rents a comparable home in the same area for $2,000 a month. They invest their $80,000 down payment in a low-cost diversified index fund at an average annual return of 8%. They also invest the monthly difference between what they pay in rent and what person A pays in total homeownership costs. That difference is approximately $1,179 per month, also invested at 8%. Over 30 years, what happens? Person A's home, assuming annual appreciation of 3%, which is roughly in line with historical averages in most markets, is worth approximately $970,000. After paying off the mortgage, their equity is approximately $970,000, minus whatever closing costs they face in selling, minus 30 years of accumulated maintenance costs, which at $500 per month over 30 years totals approximately $180,000. Their net financial position from this decision is meaningful and positive. Person B's down payment of $80,000, invested at 8% for 30 years, grows to approximately $805,000. Their monthly investment of $1,179 per month at 8% for 30 years grows to approximately $1,580,000. Total, approximately $2,385,000. These numbers are not a trick. They use the same historical return assumptions, the same time period, and the same starting amounts. What they reveal is that in this specific scenario, with these specific numbers, renting and investing the difference produces a significantly larger net worth than buying. Not because renting is magic, because the total cost of homeownership, when you include the down payment opportunity cost, the transaction costs, the carrying costs, and the interest, is dramatically higher than most people ever calculate. Now, here is where it gets more complicated, because the buy side of this equation has one major variable that can completely change the outcome: home appreciation. If person A's home appreciates at 5% per year instead of 3%, it is worth approximately $1,732,000 after 30 years. That changes the math significantly in favor of buying. If home prices appreciate at 1% per year, the math shifts dramatically toward renting. This is why the rent versus buy question does not have a universal answer. It depends on home price appreciation in your specific market. In San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, and a handful of other cities, appreciation has historically been strong enough to make buying look very good over the long run. In many other markets, appreciation has been much more modest, and the math is much less clear. How long you stay. The transaction costs of buying make short holding periods very expensive. If you buy and sell within 5 years, you almost certainly lose money relative to renting unless the market has appreciated significantly. The standard rule of thumb is that buying typically needs a holding period of at least 5 to 7 years to make financial sense, and in high-cost markets, that threshold can be even longer. What you do with the alternative. The rent and invest the difference argument only works if you actually invest the difference. If you rent and spend the money that would have gone toward a down payment, you will likely be worse off than the buyer. The renter wins financially only when the discipline to invest is genuine and consistent. Your access to leverage. One underappreciated advantage of buying is that a mortgage gives you leverage. You put 20% down and control 100% of the asset's appreciation. If your $400,000 home appreciates by $50,000, you made $50,000 on an $80,000 investment. That is a 62% return on your actual cash invested, even though the home only appreciated 12.5%. That leverage does not exist when you invest directly in stocks with your own money. Robert Shiller, the Nobel Prize-winning economist who created the Case-Shiller Home Price Index, has made a career of studying real estate returns. His research consistently shows that when you adjust for inflation, the long-run average return on residential real estate in the United States is somewhere between 0 and 1% per year. That number is not the same as the nominal price increase you see in headlines. It is the real, inflation-adjusted return, and it is often lower than people assume. But Shiller has also been careful to say that real estate's returns are only part of the story. Home ownership provides non-financial benefits that are real and valuable. Stability. The freedom to modify and personalize your space. Protection against rent increases, a forced savings mechanism that works for people who would otherwise not invest consistently. Community, school districts, a sense of permanence and belonging that renting rarely provides. These benefits are not irrational, they are real. And for many people, particularly those who plan to stay in one place for a long time, who have children in school systems they want to remain in, who derive genuine psychological value from owning their home, the non-financial benefits make buying the right choice even in scenarios where the pure math slightly favors renting. The mistake is not buying, the mistake is deciding to buy based on an incomplete financial analysis that ignores the costs that do not make it into the brochure. So what does the real decision framework look like? First, calculate your real monthly cost of ownership. Add your mortgage payment to property taxes, insurance, and a realistic maintenance budget. Compare that to what you would pay to rent a comparable place. If renting is significantly cheaper, the financial case for buying weakens. Second, calculate what you would do with the down payment if you did not buy. If the honest answer is that it would sit in a savings account earning very little, or that you would spend it, the compounding advantage of renting disappears. If the honest answer is that you would invest it consistently in a diversified portfolio, the math shifts toward renting. Third, consider your timeline. If you are confident you will stay in the same location for more than 7 years, buying becomes significantly more defensible. If there is meaningful uncertainty about where you will be in 5 years, the transaction costs of buying and selling may eat your equity entirely. Fourth, look at the price-to-rent ratio in your market. This is calculated by dividing the median home price by the annual cost of renting a comparable home. A ratio below 15 generally favors buying. A ratio above 20 generally favors renting. In many major American cities today, price-to-rent ratios are well above 20, which is a significant signal that the math currently favors renting in those markets. Fifth, be honest about the non-financial factors. If stability, community, and the ability to customize your space matter to you significantly, that is a legitimate input into the decision. Just make it consciously rather than by default. The renting is throwing money away argument collapses when you understand that almost everything you spend money on is throwing money away in the sense that it does not return capital to you. Rent buys you shelter. A restaurant meal buys you food. A car payment buys you transportation. Calling rent a waste because it does not build equity would require you to also call every other living expense a waste, which is obviously not a useful framework. What you are actually choosing between is not ownership versus waste. You are choosing between two different ways of allocating your capital. Buying concentrates it in one illiquid asset that you live in with leverage, tax advantages, and the hope of appreciation. Renting keeps it liquid, diversifiable, and potentially compounding in assets that have historically produced returns that compete with real estate without the maintenance headaches, the transaction costs, or the geographic lock-in. Neither is inherently superior. Both have genuine advantages. The one that is right for you depends on your market, your timeline, your discipline with money, and the non-financial factors that matter to your life. The most important thing you can do is run the real math for your specific situation, not the marketing version, not the cultural default. The actual numbers, honestly calculated, with all of the costs included on both sides. When you do that, the answer might be exactly what you expected, or it might surprise you. Either way, it will be yours.